Welcome to this deep dive. We've got a pretty substantial stack of sources on the table today, and we are looking straight into the bare-knuckle economics of cloud computing.
Yeah, and it really is a bare-knuckle environment right now.
It is. I mean, if you are building, managing, or, paying for technology today, you already know the landscape is getting incredibly aggressive. Just to set the stakes for you, let's look at what happened recently. In January 2026, AWS raised their GPU capacity block prices.
Right, the cost to reserve those specialized AI chips.
Exactly. They raised those prices by roughly 15%. And they did it on a Saturday, just, a weekend price hike. And before that, in November 2025, Azure quietly removed their volume discounts.
Which is huge.
Yeah, it handed companies this instant 6 to 12% cost uplift without any warning. And then Google Workspace, they just jumped their prices 16%. So the cloud vendors are squeezing their margins, and they're basically passing that pain directly to the consumer.
And what's really fascinating about this whole pressure cooker environment is the secondary industry it's created. We're seeing an absolute boom in FinOps tools.
For those who might not know, FinOps is
financial operations, right? Specifically aimed at managing and optimizing cloud costs. We just saw this company, TCAS AI, hit a $1 billion valuation.
$1 billion just to manage the cloud waste.
Exactly. There is literally more venture capital pouring into software designed to manage cloud waste than many companies actually spend on their own cloud infrastructure.
It feels like one of those gold rushes where, the people selling the shovels are making way more than the miners. So our mission today is to cut through all that noise. We're exploring two critical areas in the source material. First, we're looking at this really profound tension between the narrative of leaving the cloud.
The whole repatriation trend.
Right, the narrative versus the actual unvarnished math behind it. And second, we are going to dive into the prevention paradox. The industry is pouring billions into tools that promise to catch cloud waste before it happens. So why do our bills just keep going up? We're going to look at the psychological reason these tools are frankly failing to deliver.
Setting the stage for both of these, it becomes immediately apparent in the data that what organizations say they're doing is, well, it's vastly different from what their balance sheets actually prove. The market right now is just saturated with sensational headlines. You got hardware vendors pushing one narrative, public cloud providers pushing another, and this sprawling ecosystem of tooling vendors caught right in the middle. Our goal today is to give you a framework to understand what's actually happening beneath all that marketing spin.
So let's get right into the first topic, the repatriation files. This is that growing movement of companies taking their workloads out of the public cloud and moving them back onto their own physical hardware. And the poster child for this right now is definitely 37 Signals.
Right, the software company behind Basecamp and HUI.
Yeah. Their co-founder, DHH, took their AWS spend, which was sitting at a staggering $3.2 million a year, and he dropped it to under $1 million.
Which is a massive cut.
It's insane. They achieved this by moving to Dell servers and pure storage hardware in traditional data centers. The projected savings over 5 years is more than $10 million. And the detail that really catches your eye here, they did it with the exact same team size.
Yeah, 0 additional hires to manage the metal.
None.
It's an undeniable success story. And the underlying data absolutely validates their savings. And this is but we have to look at their specific context. 37 Signals runs highly mature web applications with incredibly predictable, steady traffic patterns.
Right.
They know exactly how much compute power they need on, say, a Tuesday in March versus a Thursday in November. That is the absolute best-case scenario for a cloud exit. If we want to look at how this plays out for a massive, complex organization with varied workloads, we need to turn to the GEICO case study.
Right, because a tech startup operates very, very differently from a traditional corporate giant. So how did this repatriation idea work out for a massive insurance company?
The GEICO situation is just the perfect counterbalance. They spent a decade migrating over 600 applications to 8 different cloud providers.
Wow.
Yeah. Eventually, they hit over $300 million in annual cloud spend. And the result of that 10-year effort, their costs exploded by 2.5 times, and their system reliability actually dropped.
So they spent 10 years just to make things worse and more expensive.
Basically, yeah. They lifted their old problems and shifted them into an environment that charges you by the second for inefficiency.
A 2.5 times cost explosion after a decade of work. I mean, that is a tough pill for any leadership team to swallow.
Exactly. And it forced a complete reversal. GEICO is now pulling the emergency brake. They've publicly committed to repatriating at least 50% of their workloads by 2029.
Okay, so how are they doing it?
They're partnering with a company called WeWin for their physical hardware, and they are building a private cloud using OpenStack. For context here, OpenStack is an open-source platform that essentially lets a company run their own private data center that acts and feels like AWS to their internal developers, but it runs on hardware they actually own.
And the results so far.
The early results are really compelling. They've already cut their compute costs by 50% and their storage costs by 60%. So it's a significant data point, proving that leaving the public cloud can save enormous amounts of money at an enterprise scale, not just for agile software companies.
Okay, so looking at 37 Signals and GEICO, if I'm a listener making infrastructure decisions today, I might hear those stories and think, the cloud is a total scam and everyone should just buy servers immediately.
Right, that's the temptation.
But let's play devil's advocate here, because there's a real danger in trusting every single anti-cloud headline that crosses our feeds. Take Ahrefs, for example.
Oh yeah, the SEO analytics company.
Yeah. Exactly. They made international tech news a while back by claiming they saved $400 million a number. They actually later updated to $1 billion by staying on premises instead of using AWS. I mean, $1 billion in savings sounds like the ultimate proof that the cloud is vastly overpriced, doesn't it?
It sounds incredibly convincing, right up until you actually look under the hood of their methodology.
Which didn't hold up.
Not at all. Industry analyst Michael Gatt completely deconstructed the Ahrefs claims, and the math simply doesn't work. It turns out Ahrefs compared their highly optimized on-premises costs to totally unoptimized AWS list prices.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they completely ignored enterprise discounts. And for a company of that size, those discounts can reach up to 85% off standard rates.
Wait. So they compared their wholesale fine-tuned costs against, retail sticker prices.
Precisely. And it gets worse. They didn't factor in savings plans at all.
Remind us how this works.
So a savings plan is an agreement where a company commits to a certain amount of compute usage for 1 to 3 years, and in exchange, they get up to a 72% discount. If you compare buying a house to renting an Airbnb by the night, Ahrefs essentially based their anti-cloud math on the nightly Airbnb rate. They assumed they would pay that maximum premium 365 days a year.
That's just bad math.
It is. They even used the wrong instance-type comparisons. They completely missed the specialized storage-optimized servers that AWS designed for exactly their type of heavy data workload. So look, the savings Ahrefs achieved by staying on premises are certainly real. They're meaningful. But that $1 billion headline, it's essentially a narrative fabrication designed to generate clicks.
It's marketing math. And if you make your infrastructure decisions based on fabricated marketing, you can end up with a disaster on your hands. Which brings us to the ultimate cautionary tale in our research.
Zynga.
The mobile gaming giant. Farmville, yes. Back in 2011, they looked at their AWS bill and thought they could out-engineer the cloud providers. They spent approximately $100 million building their own physical data centers to create this internal system they called zCloud.
And it failed spectacularly. And the reasons why are incredibly instructive for us today. Zynga simply couldn't keep pace with the innovation cycle of AWS. But more importantly, they couldn't handle the explosive, unpredictable demand of mobile gaming.
Because Farmville was so viral.
Exactly. It was a viral phenomenon. You cannot do traditional capacity planning for a viral hit when you rely on physical hardware. If your game blows up overnight, you can't wait 6 weeks for Dell to ship you more servers.
You just crash.
You crash and you lose your players. The operational reality of physical capacity planning, the constant hardware refresh cycles, needing network engineers on call 24/7, it just crushed their margins and their agility.
What happened?
They eventually abandoned their $100 million data centers. They crawled back to AWS so thoroughly that their return actually became an official AWS case study.
So we really have the full spectrum here. You've got 37 Signals saving $10 million and Zynga losing $100 million trying to do a very similar thing. When you look at the broader industry data outside of these extreme edge cases, how often does repatriation actually work?
The sobering reality, according to multiple industry analyses in our stack, is that 75% of repatriation projects actually fail to achieve their expected cost savings within 18 months.
75%.
Yeah. We just don't hear about them because CIOs don't tend to write highly publicized blog posts about their really expensive failures.
That context changes the narrative completely because right now there is this widely shared statistic floating around LinkedIn and tech media from a Barclays survey. It states that 86% of CIOs plan to repatriate workloads.
Right, Michael Bell shared it. All the legacy hardware vendors are pushing it hard.
Yeah, and if you just read the headline, it paints a picture of a mass exodus from the public cloud.
which is exactly how that statistic is being weaponized. But if you dig into the actual survey data, only 8 to 9% of those CIOs are planning full 100% exits from the cloud. The vast majority, around 70%, are pursuing a hybrid strategy.
So they aren't leaving.
No, they aren't abandoning the cloud at all. They are just getting surgical about which workloads belong where. In fact, public cloud spend is not shrinking in the slightest. Gartner projects it's going to grow 21% to reach $723 billion worldwide in 2025.
So synthesizing all of this for the listener who is trying to make sense of their own infrastructure strategy, what is the practical framework here?
The core takeaway from all these conflicting stories is not leave the cloud or stay in the cloud. The takeaway is know your workload math.
Yeah.
The cloud absolutely wins for variable workloads with unpredictable demand, like Zynga's viral games, or when you need rapid scaling and access to advanced managed services.
And the physical hardware.
On-premises infrastructure wins for steady, predictable workloads like 37 signals, where server utilization is consistently high and the technology isn't changing every single week.
And we also have to mention massive data stores in this framework, because the cloud egress fees act as this profound lock-in trap.
Oh, the data backs that up completely. Egress fees are what a cloud provider charges you to move your own data out of their system and across the internet.
And it's not cheap.
Not at all. Moving data out of an AWS S3 storage bucket to the open internet costs roughly $51,000 to $56,000 per petabyte at standard rates.
Wow.
Yeah, so if your business model relies on petabytes of static data, the cloud is essentially charging you exorbitant recurring rent just to let your own data sit there. So again, know your math. The characteristics of the workload dictate the location, not some industry ideology.
That is a perfect pivot point, because if moving out of the cloud is only a partial solution for very specific, predictable workloads, it begs a much bigger question. If the vast majority of companies are stuck in the cloud or choosing a hybrid model, why are we so universally bad at managing how much we spend on it?
It's the million-dollar question.
Right. And that brings us to our second topic, the illusion of cost prevention, specifically a concept called shift-left FinOps.
Shift-left is probably one of the most popular buzzwords in tech right now. And the conceptual idea is beautiful. It means taking cost awareness and embedding it into the engineering process before any code is actually deployed.
Right. So imagine a developer writing code, and before they hit submit, they see the exact financial impact of their architecture decisions in real time.
Exactly. It turns cloud costs into a fundamental design constraint,
Right.
rather than a frantic fire drill 3 months later when the CFO gets the bill.
It sounds like the holy grail. But as we discussed earlier with that Cast AI valuation, the tools promising to deliver this aren't actually working.
The timeline of empty promises here is really telling. The industry has been saying this capability is, quote, coming next year since January 2023. Fast forward to the State of FinOps 2026 report, and pre-deployment architecture costing is still listed as the #1 requested capability by practitioners.
Requested, not delivered.
Exactly. It is not the #1 delivered capability. 3 full years of innovation, billions of dollars, and it remains a wish list item.
And it really isn't for a lack of capital. Think about the astronomical amount of money moving around in this space. IBM acquired a company called Apptio for $4.6 billion back in 2023.
Yep.
2 years later, in November 2025, IBM's flagship cloudability governance tool, which is supposedly designed to solve this exact pre-deployment problem, is still only in public preview. It isn't even generally available yet.
That really shows how hard the problem is.
Now, to be fair, there are tools like Infracost that plug into Terraform. And Terraform, for those who might not be hands-on with it, is essentially the code developers use to automate and build their cloud environments.
Right.
But even a specialized tool like Infracost has severe limitations, right?
It does. Tools like Infracost work reasonably well for basic, static infrastructure. The problem is that modern cloud pricing is anything but basic. AWS alone has tens of thousands of individual SKUs, stock-keeping units for different services.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah. And calculating the cost depends on the region you deploy in, the specific instance family, whether you are using shared or dedicated hardware known as tenancy, the direction your data transfers, your reserved capacity agreements, your API call volume.
It's dizzying.
It is. All these variables interact in complex, nonlinear ways. Calculating true, accurate pre-deployment math for a modern architecture is nearly impossible for any commercial software tool on the market today.
Okay, so the tech is lagging way behind the complexity of the cloud. But you noted in the research that even if IBM or Cast AI perfectly solved the math tomorrow, shift left would still fail. Why is that?
Because the true blocker isn't technology at all. It's human psychology. And specifically, an incentive gap. We call it the prevention paradox.
The prevention paradox.
Think about it. Let's say a senior engineer spends an extra hour meticulously evaluating your architecture before building it. They choose a brilliant design that avoids $200,000 in annual waste.
Sounds like a big win.
It should be. But that incredible savings never appears on a FinOps dashboard. There is no costs avoided line item on an AWS bill. It is functionally invisible. You simply cannot prove prevention to the executive team.
I was looking through the notes on this prevention paradox, and there's a fascinating hypothetical here about two different engineering teams, Team A and Team B. Can you walk us through how their different approaches to building an application actually play out on the company's balance sheet 6 months later?
Sure. It's a scenario that plays out in Fortune 500 companies every single day. Let's start with Team A. They take the concept of shift left seriously. They spend 2 days upfront optimizing their architecture. They figure out the right reserve capacity, they test for the perfect instance sizes, and they deploy a highly efficient lean system that costs $180,000 a year to run.
Doing everything right.
Doing everything right. Now look at Team B. Team B just wants to ship their product quickly to meet a deadline. They are sloppy with their infrastructure. They use default oversized instances. They leave idle resources running. They rely purely on expensive on-demand pricing, and they deploy a system that costs $400,000 a year to run.
So Team B is spending more than double what Team A is spending.
Yeah, exactly. Now, 6 months go by. The FinOps team is reviewing the monthly invoices, and they flag Team B's astronomical bill. A task force swoops in. They spend 3 weeks analyzing the waste, implementing right-sizing, and optimizing the code.
Okay.
After all that effort, they managed to get Team B's cost down from $400,000 to $210,000.
Which is still $30,000 more expensive than what Team A built from scratch.
Spot on. But here is the punchline and the absolute core of the prevention paradox. At the end of the quarter, Team B and the FinOps task force are celebrated in the company-wide all-hands meeting.
You're kidding.
I'm not. They get a round of applause for saving the company $190,000. They might even get a bonus for their incredible optimization efforts. Meanwhile, Team A, who actually saved the company $220,000 from day one by doing it right the first time, is entirely invisible.
Nobody knows.
Nobody even knows they did it because there's no fire to put out.
That is infuriating, but it perfectly illustrates why shift left is a fantasy right now. We were structurally rewarding the arsonists for helping put out their own fires.
That's the trap right there. Organizations currently reward fixing waste, not preventing it. Human beings respond to incentives. If your corporate culture only celebrates optimization after the waste is created and visible on a dashboard, you are quite literally training your engineering teams to build sloppy, wasteful systems first, just so they can play the hero and fix them later.
So if we can't buy a magic software tool to do this for us, and our current incentive structures are completely backwards, what is the practical path forward? How does a company actually fix this?
To make shift left a reality, the industry has to pivot away from relying on vendor dashboards and lean heavily into human judgment and structural guardrails. First, organizations need to develop counterfactual metrics.
Counterfactual metrics.
Yeah. You need a way to track and highlight costs avoided through architecture decisions, even if it requires estimation. The behavior has to be visible to be rewarded.
And practically, how do you catch those decisions before they happen?
Through mandatory human architecture reviews. Any new digital service that is projected to cost over $5,000 a month shouldn't be deployed blindly. It needs a 30-minute review with a cloud architect who actually understands the labyrinth of AWS or Azure pricing.
So just talking to an expert.
That single 30-minute conversation will prevent more long-term waste than any automated tool on the market right now.
I see. It's putting an expert in the loop before the money is spent. And the sources also talked about something called paved paths, right?
Yes. Paved paths are essential. They are built-in cost guardrails. Instead of demanding that every single software developer also become an expert in cloud billing economics, you provide them with pre-configured infrastructure templates. Sometimes these are called golden images.
So the right choices are already made for them.
Exactly. In these templates, the most cost-efficient instance types, the cheapest storage tiers, and the optimal regions are already set as the default options. You engineer the system so that the cheapest path is also the easiest and fastest path for a developer to take. And ultimately, it requires a fundamental shift in company culture. You have to actively find ways to reward the teams that ship efficiently from day one.
This has been incredibly illuminating. We've covered a vast amount of ground today, and it feels like there is a unified thread running through all of it.
There really is.
We started by looking at 37 signals saving $10 million by walking away from the cloud, and Zynga losing $100 million trying to do the exact same thing. We dismantled that alarming narrative that 86% of CIOs are abandoning the public cloud, proving that most are just adopting hybrid models. And finally, we exposed the illusion of shift-left FinOps, and why the prevention paradox makes buying software to solve human incentive problems a losing game.
And tying it all together, the underlying theme is remarkably consistent. Whether you are a CIO trying to decide whether to rip 600 applications out of AWS, or just a junior developer trying to pick the right server size for a single new feature success, does not come from buying a magic vendor tool.
Right.
It certainly doesn't come from blindly following a social media tech trend. True success comes down to doing the hard, often invisible math of your specific workload and doing the difficult management work of aligning your company's incentives to actually reward the right behaviors.
Doing the hard, invisible math, I think that is the perfect distillation of everything we've read today.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative question to mull over based on our deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We've established that the root cause of cloud waste is not technological. It is purely based on human incentives and the prevention paradox. So what would happen if a company entirely bypassed the FinOps software ecosystem? What if they completely stopped buying optimization dashboards and simply tied a percentage of a developer's year-end financial bonus directly to the compute efficiency of the code they deploy? If developers were actually paid based on their infrastructure footprint, would the massive cloud waste problem solve itself overnight?
Wow. Now that is a thought experiment that would probably terrify a lot of engineering managers and absolutely thrill a lot of CFOs. I love leaving it on that note. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've loved unpacking this stack of sources for you. Until next time, keep doing the math, question the narratives, and we will see you on the next deep dive.